Hey stellar guitarists, I have got an awesome lesson lined up just for you today. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 ways that you can start to strengthen your fingers for faster, better, and smoother guitar playing. So a question that I get asked quite often from my students is, how do I get my fingers to move faster so that I can have faster chord changes? So it really does come down to developing 2 things. The first thing is muscle memory, and this is developed over time with a lot of patience and tons of repetition. And the second thing that we are going to be working on today is strength training. So think of a finger workout for your fingers, almost like going to the gym. So let's jump into the exercises. We're going to zoom in. Let's get started. The first exercise that we are going to be looking at today is called the spider exercise. Now, I use this exercise a lot in my guitar course, the Stellar Academy, and I just want to mention that there are so many different ways that we can play the spider exercise. But for today, we're going to keep it really simple. So we're going to have our first finger in the 5th fret, and we're going to play that once. We're then going to put our second finger into the 6th fret. We're then going to put our 3rd finger into the 7th fret. And if you can, our pinky is going to reach across into the 8th fret. Now, this is quite a challenging thing to get right, which is why I've mentioned that the spider exercise can really look like anything for you. If you can only get 2 fingers down, then this is what I like to call the 2-legged spider. And you can just practice with 2 fingers. If you can get 3 fingers down, then you just practice with 3 fingers. Now, a tip here before we move on into the rest of the exercise is, first of all, make sure that you are placing your finger right behind the fret bar. We don't want it to be in the middle or too far behind, because you're going to get a muted or buzzing sound. As soon as you push it up against the fret, it's amazing, the sound is crisp and clear. So just make sure you're starting off really nicely. When you're building a house, you want to make sure that the foundation is nice and strong. So make sure that the foundation is strong, and then when you add the walls and you add the roof, it's not going to fall apart. So we want to start with our first finger right up behind the fret. And then the same for the 2nd finger, and the 3rd finger, and even for 4th finger if you can manage. Something else you're going to want to do is play on the tips of your fingers. So we don't want to play with flat fingers. We actually want to play on the tips. So if I show you my calluses I've developed from playing on the fingertips, this is what you're wanting to do. Make sure that you're playing right on the tips of your fingers. And the final thing I want to mention is, to develop strength, you need to actually hold a position for longer than a second. So when you are playing, you want to keep your fingers down and not have flyaway fingers. So what we're wanting to aim for is control. We don't want to see fingers being lifted up and flailing around while you are playing this exercise. So this is going to really help in developing that strength. A good way to think of this is, if you went to the gym and you wanted to develop strong legs, you would repeat squats, and you'd hold your squats for 2, 3, or 4 seconds. If you didn't hold your squat and you just went down, up, you wouldn't really ever feel a burn in your legs. So in order to develop that strength, holding your fingers in a position and squeezing down on the strings is going to help you get nice, strong fingers over time. So let's play through this exercise together. We're going to play all the way down to our high E string, and then we're going to play the same exercise going backwards. So we'll be doing 4th finger, 3rd finger, 2nd finger, 1st finger, and then moving on into the next string. So let's start with our first finger in the 5th fret, a 1, 2, 3, 4. To the A string, Make sure you're keeping your fingers nice and controlled. To the G string, B string. Keep them down, no flyaways. Now we're going to do fourth finger, third finger, second finger, first finger. To the G, D string, almost there, fourth finger, third finger, second finger, first finger, and the E string. The second exercise is going to work on our fine motor skills as well as our finger independence. Now this exercise is called ghost fingers, and we're actually not going to be making any sound with our picking hand. So this is just going to be working our fretting hand fingers and developing the muscle and fine motor skills in our fretting hand. So we're going to stay up in the 5th fret, and the exercise is going to be going between odd and even fingers. So we're going to be starting with our 1st and 3rd fingers that are going to come down into the 5th and 7th frets. And they're going to come down, and I want you to apply pressure. Don't just place them on the string, actually squeeze them down onto the string. And they're going to come down at the same time. So 1 and 3. Try not to avoid putting them down separately. You want them to work together. 1 and 3. So that is going to be our odd numbers. We're then going to move on to the even numbers, which is going to be 2 and 4. And they're going to come down together, squeezing. So 1 and 2. 1, 2. It's 2 movements, okay? So we have the first movement and the second movement. And this is going to be repeated on each string. So we have the E string, the A string, squeezing, and this is really going to help us with our finger independence. Think about that exercise where you're patting your head and rubbing your stomach. This is a similar technique and a similar exercise to help develop the independence and just to help with your brain to finger coordination. So try that one more time. We have our 1st and 3rd fingers coming down together, squeezing, and our 2nd and 4th fingers coming down together. Moving along through each of the strings. So this is our ghost finger exercise. The third exercise I like to call finger stretches. So we're going to keep our fingers in the same position, and you can place your 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers onto the G string, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th frets. And you're just going to place them there nice and comfortably. And this is a tough exercise because you're going to become very aware very quickly of your lack of range of motion. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lift our 1st finger up and touch the low E string and bring it down to touch the high E string. So these are our stretches. We're stretching up and we're stretching down. So up and down while keeping the other 3 fingers down. We don't want this to happen. That's beside the point. We want to keep our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers in these frets and not moving too much. We're just working that 1st finger up and down. And with this exercise, you are quickly going to feel your muscles working. You're going to feel them even burning, but in a good way. So think of when you're at the gym and you're doing push-ups and you feel that burn in your muscles. This is what you are going to feel, almost like finger push-ups. So once you've done the 1st finger 10 times, you can place it on the string, and we're going to move on to the 2nd finger. And we're going to go up to the low E string and then come down to the high E string. And just make contact with those 2 strings. So these 2 fingers are not necessarily too tricky. So once we've done that one 10 times, we're going to move on to the 3rd finger. Now this one's quite tough. We're going to reach it up to the E string and reach it down to the other E string. So low E string, high E string, low E string, high E string, keeping the control. even if you have to do it super slowly, rather have the control and get it right. We're then going to put our third finger back, and the final finger that you're going to use is the pinky. Now this one's quite tough because it's a shorter finger. Trying to get it all the way up to that low E string is quite challenging. So even if you're just touching the A string or even just the D string and coming down to the high E, reaching it up and down. And you're going to repeat this 10 times on each of your fingers. The fourth exercise is a hammer-on exercise. This is a really important skill to work on as a guitarist because as you progress and you start to play more and more music, you're going to come across hammer-ons and pull-offs in quite a lot of songs. So practicing this in an exercise format is going to enhance your level of control when it comes to executing this movement. Now, often students will try too hard to get a hammer-on or a pull-off to sound. But the truth is that the movement itself can be quite small. Well, it should be quite small. It's all about the finger strength at the end of the day and also finding that sweet spot on the string where you place your finger. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice a hammer-on and pull-off on our low E string, same fret, 5th fret, and we're going to pluck that string with our first finger down and we're going to hammer on. So first finger, hammer on the second finger. Now yours might sound like this. And that's perfectly normal because as beginners, our fingers are not yet strong. And also you need to execute this motion over and over again before you can find that sweet spot when hammering down. This kind of plays into the whole thing we spoke about earlier with muscle memory and repetition. So first finger, you're going to pluck and you're going to hammer on. And you can do that 4 times. We're then going to try that with the second finger and the third finger. So we're going to pluck the second finger and hammer on the third. That one's a little bit more difficult. And then we're going to do the third finger hammering on the pinky. And this one's going to be even more difficult. Now, if this is too tricky for you and you're finding it hard to play up on your low E string, we can bring it down to the high E string so you're not having to strain your wrist too much. And you can practice this on all of the strings. Try not to lift up the finger that you're pressing down initially. So what we don't want is for this to happen. Keep that first finger down if that is the starting note for the exercise. The same applies for the second finger. When you're hammering on the third finger, keep this second finger down for the duration of that portion of the exercise. And the same applies for the third finger and the pinky. And the final exercise that we're going to learn today, I like to call chord hops. And this is where we're going to form a chord and we're going to apply pressure. This is going to help with muscle memory development as well as the strength training of the fingers used in that chord. So I'm going to choose a chord sequence just consisting of the C major and the G major chord. Now, when playing chords as a beginner, this is what usually happens. So this sounds choppy, and there are obvious gaps between those changes. So why is this happening? So the chord changes are happening too slowly. What you are doing, or what I was doing, and what beginners tend to do, is that you're thinking about each finger and where that finger needs to go. instead of thinking about your hand creating a chord shape. So your fingers need to become like a team of players that are all working together. So when it comes to chords, it cannot be approached as a single finger exercise. So instead of placing your fingers one at a time, you need to almost place all your fingers down together to create that chord. Together. So they're all hopping into place, hence the name chord hop, at the same time. So we have C, G, C, G, and this can be applied in a strumming pattern as well. That is very different when you compare it to doing it the wrong way. So the chord hop exercise is going to help you in trying to think of your fingers working as a team and not individually. All right. So how we're going to do this is we're not going to be strumming any of these chords. So what I want you to do is to choose 2 or 3 or even 4 chords that you are struggling with at the moment, and you're going to use the chord hop exercise. So I'm going to just use C and G to keep it simple. And what I want you to try and do is place all your fingers on the strings at the same time and squeeze. Don't forget the squeeze. If you don't squeeze, you're not going to be building that strength your fingers need. So you're going to place and squeeze. And something we can also do to try and further improve that muscle memory is to actually tap our leg and then reform the chord. So we are breaking down and rebuilding those pathways in the brain. So slap, build, and squeeze. Slap and squeeze. Now yours might start looking a little bit like this because you're really trying, but you might be landing on the wrong strings, but that's fine as long as you are trying. And the more you do this, the better it will become. And you'll start to slowly stop building your chords like this. And you will start to build them as one movement, or you'll start to build them in one movement. So we're going to slap and form that chord shape, slap and form the chord shape. You can definitely do it slower. I'm just showing you at full speed what this could look like. And you'll do each chord 4 times and then repeat the sequence. C, C, don't forget to squeeze that chord, and then back to the G. So once you start to get this motion and it's starting to become a little bit easier to you and you're noticing that, wow, my fingers are all landing at the same time, I'm so proud of myself, you can then start to be a little bit more careful about which strings you're squeezing down. So first get the motion, even if it's kind of all over the place. And then once you can do that, you can start to refine which strings you are squeezing down. So I really hope that these exercises are going to help you and that you're going to use them in your practice sessions going forward. So those are my top 5 exercises that I encourage all my guitar students to use. This is really going to help you in developing that finger strength so that you can tackle any chord and get from one chord to the other and play all your favorite songs. So if you enjoyed today's lesson, please could you like this video and subscribe to my channel. It would be awesome to have you part of the Stellar Guitarist community. One last thing I would like to leave you with is to try and incorporate at least 2 or 3 of these exercises into your guitar practice sessions. By doing this, I am sure you're going to start noticing a big difference. So drop a comment below if you are going to start including these exercises into your practice routine. I cannot wait to see you in next week's lesson. Have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.